The intro song playing? No, it's playing. Keep it playing. There's the intro song. Let's see. Oh, there's the intro song. All right. Let's see. Oh, I should have had a camera on that for the transition. See, I'm still making my coffee. 8 a.m. That should be going live right about now. What's up, everybody? Loyalty, Ryan Cobb. Ryan, did you send me an email? I need to get back to you. And let's see if I can get this thing rolling. Let's see. How does it work again? I gotta go. There we go. Oh, what happened? That's weird. There it is. Oh, there we go. Good morning. I made it. Okay, there we are. Oh, here's what I really want to show you. I'll show that again. Cosmic Charlie in the house. That's a glow in the dark unit even. Let's see. Turn the light off, see what happens here. Oh, here, wait, I brought the black light to show you Charlie. Yeah, all right, everyone, morning. It is 20 degrees outside. It is the 12th of January 2022. I got the story of we're going to interview Dr. Dream himself in the house here. And let's see, I wonder, how do I get that? I'm going to show you. Why? No sources selected, no filter view. What's going on here? Oh, I got to go deactivate and activate. Okay, transition. Boom, that's me again. Okay, so I'm still learning this OBS crap out, and I wanted to the origins of Dr. Dream. So for the folks, it's backwards there. I'm sorry. You guys hear and you see that? There's the Dream Doctor. And I know it's a pencil drawing. It's not the easiest thing in the world to see. You see these beautiful ladies. And I actually stole this artwork. I kind of like facsimile drew this from changed it. It was a band called The Dream. Okay, and I changed it to The Dream Doctor and added in these things. And so this is from like 1989 or 90. What is it? It's dated 89. And I might have dated that later. This could be, I think it's 90. And so that's the origins of Dr. Dream right there. And what it says, adventures in the mind, specializing in opiates, cannabis, and it says indicas, sativas, psychedelics, all kinds, mescaline, peyote, and San Pedro, lysergic acid, diethylamide in the block lettering. So that's the origin of Dr. Dream. And so living where I live, and you might hear the hash queen of America, Jane Doe, mentioned. She grew up nearby here in Utah, and she was afraid to internet, and how her moving away and meeting people directly and seeing things directly and finally figuring out, hey, I got to do this on my own. The boys wouldn't let her play, etc. Well, so again, another person figuring it out on their own. There's a lot of us who do that and don't literally, and they end up taking it to another level, right? Because they're not playing into the paradigm that everyone else is living by. So, like, hash was always an incidental to me. I meant to grab the freaking screen. I forgot to. I was running around trying to figure out how to get these videos to play, and it's not. I'm having issues with my video player, and I didn't want to start over. Sorry. So wasted a little time there learning lessons the hard way. But I want to show you guys I just use a regular old art screen, right? And it's that first drop while you're dry trimming, and even before I was dry trimming, when you wet trim or go back through and clean up a secondary time after you trim it, you're cutting them off of the stem after you've hung them to dry in a wet trim scenario, and you're just cutting the nugs off of that stick, and it bounces off. You're always going to lose trichomes no matter what you're doing. So if you do that over a trim bin or the proper lines per inch of silk screen, you're going to get this incredible first drop virgin creme de la creme melty hash. And any amount of crushing your flour after that, you end up adding corruption to it. Okay, and corruption could be leaf, it could be hairs, it could be particulates of vegetative matter, it could be the stalks under the trichome, right? But that gets forced through when you try and push stuff across with a card and all that stuff, and you have to get into your static cleaning and all of that stuff to mass produce or bulk produce. And that gets to be a pain in the ass, right? There's all these different styles, there's all these different techniques, there's a lot of different ways that work for different people. And for me, it never really, it's like, man, this is not worth the freaking time. I'll just make it into cancer medicine after it's been, I figured out ways you can rewash and stuff, but seeing people doing the ice hash, and I'd heard about it and experimented without any bags at all, was the very first, right? So I think we can go back to like 1990s when I first started using just the standard speedball silkscreen, and it would have been about 2001 or 2 when the fellow I refer to as my mentor went ahead and started teaching me about how he learned to make hashish in the streets of Morocco. And I started moving forward and improving upon what I was afforded to experience that would come over in commercial movements. For instance, sink an oil tanker full of hashish from Afghanistan and off the coast of Santa Barbara. Every once in a while, they'd go pull bail that off. And that's also how, there would be Thai weed the same way. There'd be a tanker sunk or a ship of some size sunk off the coast, and they'd come out and divers would acquire some. And so, but we all had keef, we all had finger hash, we all had the stuff at the bottom of the bags, and the mystifying difference between that loose stuff at the bottom of the bag and the aged hash or whatever that was something that was so wonderful to come across and try. And but what we had was, as I know now, was the low grade export crap. So refining, and I tried to do some larger volumes of it. I just never. I tried to do the ice water. Never really. And over the years, like the mentor handed me his genetics, and I had what came from my brother. And in-house 20 years developing what became Dr. Dream. And the plant itself, like Dr. Dream All Cure, Zion Curtin's Godsend Genetics is what its original name was. Pressures from law enforcement and other societal pressures, whatever it is, all the things that make you lose all your genetics down to just the last few seeds. And that was literally my brother's Hindu Kush inbred. I had seed from it from bag seed from when I had left or whenever I'd visit him or whatever. And then I got a cut from it from one of his protege moved out here. and inbred those. And I inbred the stuff that my mentor gave me that he had bred and traveled the world to collect in 26 land races or 22 land races mashed up over 26 years that he spent working on that, and back crossed it into the Hindu Kush again. And eventually we got that young Trustafarian kid local to the ski resort. He went and traveled all over California, and he has a legal grow out there now. And but he showed up with, after having gone to every dispensary throughout the state in like I want to say 2007 or so. In 2008, I acquired the cut of the direct from the through this guy's hands. He acquired it from the San Fernando Valley dispensary, where the OG, the infamous San Fernando Valley OG Kush comes from. And so that ended up getting crossed in, and things shut down, and I had no plants and 7 or 8 seeds. And it was autumn, cool in the house. I never kept the house really warm, energy saving, right? You followed me at all, I'm really hardcore about not using excessive energy outside of the means of or the real needs, and we can reduce our energy consumption. And some of that goes back to growing up during the oil embargoes, just understanding like the ability for us to be way more efficient than we and our laziness, etc. Right? Producing the best quality for medicines with the least amount of inputs and energy input and all of that stuff. And part of that, I never kept the house warm, and well, that didn't necessarily help with popping seeds, right? And all sorts of lessons learned, some prior lessons that I had learned trying to figure out things, how to grow dry farm and stuff in California. One of the things that made Dr. Dream happen and why this genetic exists, and I'm really thinking hard on how to get this out as a cut now that I've been working with it, and so people can really experience this in medicine. But one of the things that happened and when I was in college was found in deep December a seed had sprouted under the porch, and one of the few times it actually freezes in San Luis Obispo. And growing out from the concrete porch, there was a plant growing, and this was been 90, 91. And I kind of babied it for a month and a half or whatever, but then eventually the gardener came through the apartment complex and ripped the thing out and threw it in the dumpster. And I noticed it when I was scrubbing house and had a big bowl of gross scrub water from the walls and the floors or whatever it was, and I went to go dump it into the dumpster instead of wherever else I would have put it, and dumped it on that plant and its bare exposed roots where this guy had ripped it out of the ground. And I grabbed that plant and I rinsed it off, and I did some experimentation with it, just my understanding of how plants are, and it wasn't yet to full wilting point or permanent wilting point, PWP. It had some limpness to it. It was gone totally flaccid. But I pulled that plant out of the dumpster and I washed off all the chemicals I just dumped on it. And I popped off some of the fan leaves, and I popped off the top of it, and I stuck the bottom of it into a bottle of water. And then I took the top of it and placed it into my mouth. And I sucked water in through the roots. And the leaves kind of went... All right. That plant I transplanted out into the forests, and that was one of my early experiments with dry forming. And I placed it out next to a creek side in the gravel where it would get light throughout the year at an angle different times of the year. And I went back and collected it. I visited it a couple of times, and I tried a couple of things where, like, taking a plastic bag and poking holes into it and putting Miracle-Gro into the bag and slightly upstream from it. Because in the riparian zone, in the gravel there in the stream bed, there's not a whole lot of nutrient, right? There's a lot of oxygen. You can see the willow's roots sticking out and flowing those red roots into the creek bed itself sometimes, right? There can be a lot of oxygen if the water's moving, but it strips all of the, for instance, nitrogen moves like the water itself. Any of the salts moves like the water, goes right on by, and those while they're getting enough oxygen in that aerated water, right? And depending on how close you are to the edge, and how far up the side and how far its taproot can come down. That's some of my early experimentation with it, and that's one of the things that allowed Dr. Dream to survive when the time came. So fast forward again, and I got the last of this very last 6 seeds of all of whatever it was, my brother's work and my mentor's work, and all the work I had done with these plants, and keeping it this medicine that dealt with the fact that I had these extreme pain profiles and I didn't know what was going on. Having had broken my neck twice and not known it, and just got up and kept going. Just an aside, Red Primo says he often gets frost at 35 in the chat, and I have a whole series on my Instagram you might want to check out where I show frost at 40 degrees, and we go through the science of why the evapotranspiration, the latent heat of evaporation, chilling the temperature, especially if you have another energy source to continue pushing heat through. But that's just an aside. And then back to, so all this work coming back into Dr. Dream, All Cure literally was on the line in these plants, and they were under a little lamp and in a cold space in the basement and doing their thing. And I'd be go, I go to work. I was working up in Park City, remodeling people's mansions, and I come back and there's the plants and the seedlings. Like I got 3 out of the 5 or 8 seeds only that popped, and it was. I come home one day and like whatever it was, whether it was 5 plants or 3, they all had Phytophthora and flopped over. The stems on every one of them had rotted away, and they gone limp. And there goes 50, 60 years of work between myself and my mentor, my brother. And I looked at it and I didn't even think, I just acted. And I did the exact same thing I did to that plant that I pulled out of the dumpster. And I took those things and I immediately got everything prepped. I got some all, and I sliced that bottoms off of those fuckers away from the rot and put them into a sterile environment and sucked the trigger. I put the whole plant into my mouth and sucked water back up into that stem. Okay. I think I managed to save 3 that day, and I was fretting because this is before I'd pulled my head out of the ground, out of the cave over the rock over my head, just before I understood my First Amendment right that I had established and other people were enjoying. This is before PFA and stuff, before my back completely finished and said I can't work anymore. So it was like the one thing that I had that I'd selected for, so where I could actually work and function still. Severe pain, literally levels of pain that I would go blinded by the white light in between on the days I wasn't working, just laying on the floor trying to recover, ringing in my ears from the extreme pain, and I would go deaf, and my little child would be rocking me while I was laying on the floor going, Daddy, please feed me, I'm hungry. And I just knew she was there, and there was like I couldn't function as a human being, right? And the only thing that would really alleviate any of this was smoking some of that Dr. Dream All Cure that just obliterates you. And that might have been part of the reason I was laying on the floor, was because I'd take 10 hits of that, 6 hits of that. I couldn't do that right now. 2 hits of it, and 5 hours later, I'm waking up type of thing. Because it's so, well, I like big hits. So if you take them smaller, it's fine. But it's, so anyhow, there I was, and I'm looking at these seeds, and they're dead. And I say, I revitalized a few of them, and I managed, one, they fucking failed. They failed, and I managed to get root off of 2 of them, and one of those ones ended up dying. And so we ended up with just the very last one. And I'm like, this is the godsend genetic. And so it ended up being actually the one. Pretty amazing. And but yeah, so it was the one I needed, and it's the one a whole bunch of other people needed. and it's an excellent producer of the hashish for dry sift as well. And I managed to get some amazing. Once I learned and I started watching the fellows like in Pakistan and Afghanistan and how they do their traditional dry sift in the cold temperatures and stuff. Um, they'd be there was improvement, and trying not to work it too hard, right? And I ended up getting stuff that's hey, that went full melt. The temple balls would just collapse after a day or two and get all greasy looking and stuff. That's amazing. Started really understanding it at that higher level, and how not just watching those guys on YouTube in Pakistan and stuff, but interacting with folks and listening and learning from people like Frenchie and seeing how he was understanding it. And he spent his life in the hash fields in the different places of the world, different regions, living with families. That's how they did their thing. And, we all see he wore glasses and his vision wasn't so great normally. And one of the things that was profound to hear him say that is like, you can't even see the trichomes to understand that is this thing you can't even see. And like, I was blessed with perfect vision my whole life. So I've always seen these things just fine. And it's like, oh wow, we all have these different realities. And this guy's entire reality is studying hashish, and his vision was such that he couldn't even physically, visually see these things that we're all striving for until they broke out microscopes and stuff, right? And it helps. And utilizing the microscope makes a big difference in how I'm able to make the hash itself and understand what I'm looking for in the selection and breeding and timing, the flower and things like that, right? We got why hash? For me, again, originally, for the most part, it was incidental. It was something that happened through the process of trimming and curing, and it wasn't something I was striving for. Yet I ended up producing super quality incidentally. And Kruger Dunning effect, boom, there's one right there. Yeah, I thought I was the hash, and I produced some pretty good traditional hash. Why? Again, besides the incidentals, what does it do? I find it really takes the edges off of some of the more extreme flower statuses. And here, right here, the sorry, distractions. The stuff that's a little bit up, that's a little too up and a little too racy, can be brought into through the hash. And this is my experience, to where you're not just super wired, but you're functional and up and medicated, right? And then as well, my stream is my stream, but some of the other ones that don't necessarily have as high, but you can still get couch lock, especially if it's older in age, and so there's not Champa here in chat saying hash for the body, flower for the mind. And then again, I've got to say, it's got so much to do with your primary genetic inputs and the type of what the chemistry is, right? So you can make hash out of the sativas that bring you up, right? And they're still going to be up, and you're going to be very well medicated in both body and mind when you consume that concentrate, especially if you can get into these full melt forms that totally have a very different effect than the incense forms, which are great, and you have to use a different tool to consume them and stuff. And as I'm getting more and more of this higher melty, and it's like not necessarily a nail that you're looking for. I think one of those cup pipes that has the holes on the top is really one of the great ways to use that fuller melt regime. It's cleaner for your lungs if that's the way you need to intake, on the wise. some people, that flavor terpene concentrates in, but definitely avoiding smoke is key, and that's part of one of the things that why I've always was where I was selecting and breeding with, like, I had lung damage from both wildland firefighting and having grown up smoking cigarettes. I used to smoke up to 5 packs a day, and I smoked cigars and chewed tobacco. I was a nicotine addict on another level. There is possibilities that adds to my ability to see spirit with the third eye and things like that. There's tobacco without having known any of that stuff as a youth, and I've learned about it now. But that's one of the original medicine man plants for seeing is the tobacco. So I definitely have always wanted to really avoid the excesses of inputs into the lungs that might be deleterious to the body temple. I really enjoy smoking. Like I said, I grew up smoking tobacco and did stupid shit like smoking entire cigarettes in one bong load. Not many people can say they could actually consume that much, have that much lung capacity, etc. So just because you can doesn't mean you should. Classic example. But when it came to dealing with as pain advanced and, like I described, white light vision, like I can't function, ringing in my ears, can't feed my child, and I have to get up the next day and go climb a tree with a chainsaw to go earn the money to pay for the child care, to pay in the mortgage, and chasing that material 6 figures. There was I literally I don't have my pieces with me, but I carried the same brass pipe I used as a firefighter when I go tree trimming, and I come down out of the tree and lean across the front of my bench seat in the truck and take 2 huge hits. The same thing I used to do firefighting. And that's, incognito and effective. So the Dr. Dream allowed me to do this extreme stuff and maintain focus of mind. So it makes this really beautiful dry ice sift, right? And again, see people talking about when she pulled my head out of the hole in the cave in the desert, and people talking about this bubble hash, and you may have heard me describe my first time experiencing the bubble hash at the Grateful Dead concert, and Cousin Charlie, baby, yeah, how do you do? So one time I traded a cookie for some bubble, and I didn't know what it was, and this fella in the crew I was with took it, and everyone's looking at it going, what is this stuff? And it was nice stabilized bubble hash, probably a 70 to 40, and the guy's like, let me see it, and he takes it and holds a lighter to it, and it totally melts. It's like, it's bubbling, that's not hash, and he throws it into the gravel of the parking lot, right? And so it's years later before I experienced that and making it myself or whatever. But start seeing everyone in these groups and interaction in the hive mind, and seeing it's like, wow, I'm really not doing this as good as I could be, could I? Being an artist, part of the thing about art is pushing the potato around and solving the equation, finding the variables and figuring out, how do I solve for X? What are these different parameters that changes what's going on here? And so it really helps when you're able to discuss that with other people and see what's going on, right? Hive mind. And so getting into some groups on Facebook or whatever it is can really help you see where you're on if you're trying to figure this out, because your situation is going to be different than mine, than different than theirs, different than anyone else's. And so you got to find, just like studying a fine artist, one of the best ways you can do the thing is you go and study up everything you can to learn about a particular master and their art, and you find one that inspires you It makes you feel good about the work you're seeing them produce or produced or whatever. And you study everything about the paint they utilize, right? And the brushes they utilize and the canvas they utilize and how they prepare their canvas, or if it's a wooden panel. Okay. And their style of preparing the entire project. Okay. So some people are able to just go out and set up and just bam, wipe out a bunch of oil paint on a panel and they have a painting. Other people go through and they'll do a couple of sketches first, and maybe they'll use their camera to produce a lens finder scene and work from what they see in that. And some people will use a little card, right? People are using very different oils, paints, and different mediums when they're creating a master work or learning how to do it and working through. And like one of the first things when it comes to oil paint, and I got to say the same thing when it comes to breeding or making hash, you with the oil paints is the analogy. Get a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't pay a lot of money for and don't have a lot of emotional investment into, and have that and start working it, right? And I literally, like the oil paints, I went out and bought a bunch of cheap oil paint, just student grade, in the huge tubes at the lowest cost possible, and squirt them on a big piece of glass, and you start smearing them around and seeing what happens when you mix those colors and when they turn to mud and you get to feel the texture, and you get to feel all right. And so one of the things I've heard one of the hash masters talking about was, if you want to learn how to make rosin, just get all the dry sift and keef out of the bottom of the bags you can that wasn't highly refined, and just right. If you got old stuff sitting around, wash it up or sift it out and come up with that to work with, to start to feel the feel of pulling your press and when it releases the oil. Okay, so that is a fine art. There's a science to it, and understanding your temperature ranges and things like that as well, right? Understanding your micron sizes and how to fold in and double bag. All that shit piles up, right? There's the simple buy the press, buy the bags, throw your weed in and press it, and you end up having burnt popcorn. The terps are ruined, and it's not medicine. It's just it's a cheap drug at that point, right? And there's a lot of different ways to go. Okay, there is literally one of the greatest confusions for people who want to start oil painting, and I'm using these analogies so I hope you understand that I'm talking about these other fine arts that we more concentrate on in the cannabis world. Right, but they're so parallel in the concepts, whether I'm talking about extremes, the fine arts and science of extreme skiing or oil painting or all this stuff. I mean, I could take it right into the tree service stuff too. It all parallels. How do you understand and learn these equations? And so brain fart. I want to do, I went and like I said, you've heard me say it was 92-ish when I first did closed loop using ether, assisting a fellow who's a biochem student, and he made his own glass, right? And then you come back and you see people making shatter BHO, and it's a whole different process. And they started with the open blasting and PVC pipe, right? And realized that's probably not the best idea. And people weren't even freaking using vacuum chambers back then. And people started learning more and more and more, and you progress. And so I learned how to do that. People kept bringing me freaking glass tubes and cans of BHO. I'm going, yeah, I really don't, I don't want to. And I'm fine. Okay, well, I'll figure this art and science out, and took it to, I don't know, people who really utilize it. And you give it to some cancer patients, and it's great. And that's one form that, again, go through all of the processes. And in order for me to do it as a production method, I don't like the energies and I don't like the outputs and the residues that come from the system. It's not conducive to my morality, right? The money that I could possibly get from that does not offset the fact that I'm putting fluorocarbons into the atmosphere, which is a natural thing, but we put it out in a way unnatural level, right? On top of that, the amount of energy required for the heating and cooling, even in a passive blast system. Even utilizing the depths of winter when it's 20 degrees and less outside to affect the temperature changes for the condensation systems, and passive system, right? Okay, so at that rate, I've made this beautiful product that people just like say this is amazing. It tastes like I've never tasted anything like this, blah, blah, blah. But it's so dark, I don't think I can keep selling. People don't, they freak out on the dark. They want the light, clear colored shit. So what is the energy inputs required for creating that clarified stuff from properly cured and aged medicinal flowers? That whether it's through breeding or whatever, I don't sell. I'm not a dealer. I don't have this. I have this stuff sitting around, and I want to make it into a medicine that people can use. But people aren't going to use it because of color. Or color remediation process requires another level of energy inputs, because you can't do it passively. You need 40 psi minimum pushing against the filter. Okay. So to me, it's just like, stop, break. That is outside of my moral bounds of producing a good, right? People produce goods and services. They're not necessarily good goods and services. They're good for making a profit for them. And if that's all you're thinking about, there's so many ways you can do it, right? Outside of this spectrum of there's true craftsmen and passionate people that just coming in and trampling, and there ain't probably anyone here watching that, but you know what I mean. Capital just wrecks the economy of scales, and people trying to strive to compete to make as much as they can to get by so they can continue to produce the craft that they can't do, because you can't do craft at economy of scales, and then et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So again, looking for how do I effectively produce proper medicine that's within my moral spectrum, and refining and learning and studying and understanding that it's just not, it's like gleaning wheat. And the gleaner, whether it's from the Bible or other discussions, the poor widow or a widow woman who goes through the field after the drovers have pulled up all the grain, right, and picking up the single stalks. Having run an organic farm that I literally brought old school combine in, but I also did a full acre by hand, where I literally used the scythe and a pitchfork and gathered up all the grain by hand and all the straws and piled it all up. And I used the staff to thresh, and I used the wind to winnow. And I know the exact energy caloric time value of hand grinding the wheat into a loaf of bread. And to go around and glean wheat, you will survive barely. Okay. And to me, it's like, I'm trying to do this through for pennies on stubble fields. And someone in the chat says, blow your mind if I was bald. And I used to shave my head. I kept it shaved for years and years and years, not razor shaved, but without an attachment, right? Or marine style, super short, flat top. Right? So, how do we improve efficiency, effectiveness without putting detriment onto the environment? Okay, even if you don't believe the anthropomorphic global warming, you must understand that we pollute and make each other sick for profit. Okay, and that's bad. Period. It ain't good for your grandchildren. It might feel good for you right now, right? So for me, I'm looking, how do I take this to the next level? How do I keep taking it to the next level of efficiency and meets my moral standards? Because I believe very much we are eternal souls, and we're here to do good and learn lessons and make a whole nother advancement to a higher spiritual level for ourselves. Okay. And we have materialism that is the temptation that we all seem to succumb to. And I, even knowing it, succumb to it myself. And I want, and fun is fun, and good things are good things, and all of that, right? And you can't have, it's hard to be happy without money, but breaking past those morals is even bigger, because like, I never saw that money made anybody a better person, right? All this explaining where did Ice Cream Tek? And I had a different thing planned. I was going to show you videos of the Ice Cream Tek and a little bit more of that today, but I am going to introduce a little bit of the technology here in a second. Listening to Frenchie and stuff, reading through his reports, listening to the kids that learned from him and how they took what they learned and moved it in another direction, right? Breaking out the microscopes and really looking at trichomes on a whole nother level, not just looking for, I went for decades using only a 10x lens for everything I did, both as an arborist, pest management professional for farms and homes and stuff like that. And I was a certified pesticide applicator by the state of Utah, using chemicals and both, organic systems when I transitioned to that kind of stuff even more. But I did that all with a 10x hand lens and then bumping it up to a 40 or getting, do I have it the hand here? Yeah, I do. This thing right here, the $20 digital microscope off Amazon. I tell you what, change your life. You will take yourself to the next level. Least cost. They have a proper full stand now that comes with this. I can get it on back order and say, hey, send me one of those. But when you break this thing out and start looking at things that we can't see with our eyes, right? Just like Frenchie said, and that's what keyed me into like, man, I really need to take this to a whole nother. Like, I understand microbes. I haven't looked at them on a microscope since I was in college. I still haven't got any slides to put those on yet, right? To start. But that's what I'm going to be doing this spring, is showing you guys as I break out the vermicompost piles start to thaw out. And we'll break that thing out and show you different compost piles under a microscope. So, but yeah, learning that and looking at that and understanding a little bit more and learning a little bit more. The day I watched Frenchie describing the absence of the abscession of the trichome head, and how some plants don't even produce a proper abscession, and the way the stalk forms, and et cetera, and all this shit comes back around. And listening to Frenchie describe how he started liking the washing machines, and then also finding out what the problems for the washing machines are that everybody encounters, and looking at buying washing machines or looking at we can get junk washing machines, like full-sized ones for cheap, and just as cheap as one of those little plastic ones, right? How do you chill that water? Where's that ice water coming from? What's all that temperature? How much ice you got to put in there, and why do you put ice in there? The ice is in there to keep the temperature at 32 to 34 degrees is the optimal. You don't really want to go in above 36 degrees. You want that water right there above at that working temperature to maintain your flowers frozen. And this is stuff I learned from Frenchie. He's doing it dry. Other people are doing it fresh frozen, right? That same temperature range is where you want to work. And the ice isn't knocking your trichome heads off. It's the vortex swirl of the water. And he utilized that term vortex, and that really stuck on me. Okay. And so it's this, there's discussions, people talking about, and one of the first times I made ice water hash, the instructions I heard was to get a hold of a cake blender, a handheld, double-headed, rotating mixer deal, right? Fucking ruins your hash. You froth everything up, and you turn everything into microparticulates, and you've got corruption, mass corruption, and so that's like, I didn't go back. There was the fact that I bought cheap bags, and once I started hearing some of these professional talking about you got to get good bags, and it kind of clicked, right? And somebody ended up actually gifting or bringing me by in trade some really nice bags, and as soon as I used them, I saw the huge freaking difference. One of the first things I heard from Frenchie talking long ago was that he only uses these spectrums here, and you get rid of the rest of the bags, and what I didn't miss was that was for producing rosin. You don't need if you're not going for the full melt and stuff, right? You can press out a larger spectrum together and get just a fine product, okay? And so I mistakenly cut out certain bags even when I had those poor quality ones to start with, and wasn't getting a good separation to actually even see where the heads dropped, right? So getting a full spectrum of bags and washing them is huge. One of the things I'm excited about that's coming out that's going to make a huge difference too is the I can't think of the product name, Ice Screen or something like that. This guy's come up with that. He's produced a stainless steel unit that screws onto a mason jar. You can weigh your 20 grams or 10 grams into a mason jar with ice and shake it and filter it through your stacked filters, right? You'll be able to see what's coming through. 15 minutes. So these thoughts, like, okay, so with the ice, putting water or putting ice in, having to keep putting ice in, you're increasing your volume. You have the laws of thermodynamics say unless you have a cold room, you're going to be losing heat through all the surface of your structure that's holding your ice water, right? And all of the thermodynamics and stuff. And so, like, I joke about sometimes the fire is my God, the laws of thermodynamics are my scripture. But the laws of thermodynamics describe all the stuff we talk about in occultism, right? As well. But if you think about producing hash and you use the laws of thermodynamics, apply it to them scientifically, you start realizing, like, well, there's ways that we can really preserve some of that heat energy. I've never once seen anybody wrap one of those little blue 5-gallon clothes washer machines in a freaking sleeping bag. You know, cheap Coleman sleeping bag and save you, I don't know how many pounds of ice in a day. But that's one of the ways I think. I've built a cold storage unit in the garage using I didn't even make a cold bot. I jimmy rigged an old school wall unit, and I was trying to utilize that for preserving my vegetables in the dead of summer when it gets to be 120 degrees in the garage, right, with no humidity to reduce. And how many layers of just thin plastic does it take to create insulation above an R20? Okay, so these thoughts. Now, I used to collect ice cream makers. I used to love making ice cream. It was a great hobby. Hand crank and plug in electric and the different motors and how strong they are and the different shapes of the cylinders and the resistance and kind of some of the stuff that plays into, for instance, resistance of water in a pipe or a hose and hydrology kind of acts in on the resistance in making ice cream, right? And how much ice and how much salt and how thick the ice cream gets and whether the gears can continue to push that machine around. But I literally, when I threw out or gave away, because I just don't make ice cream anymore, my daughter's growing up and we don't have a bunch of kids running around in the summer. I was like, had all this stuff around and I came across some newer tech ice cream machines and I got rid of all my old ones. And I always say this whenever I get rid of something I've hoarded, like, I'm gonna in about 2 months wish I hadn't thrown these away. And these ideas started popping into my head about how does this work and what do you do and how does this thinking about what Frenchie was saying. And so right here we have one of these old ice cream makers. Right, here's the head. Pretty simple thing, and it's got a gear inside of it there, right? And so this thing it's powered down so slow. It's made to be able to like crank. Let's see here. This thing here is actually stationary in the system. Okay. All right. It stays in there. It doesn't rotate. It holds still, and this little gear head here spins. And so the older ones you can find them, they're metal, whatever. This is nylon. And so, but I've made quite a few batches so far, and it's all holding together with the one I've jimmy rigged and prototyped, right? And the same with my art and supply invention. It started as just stuff I got from the thrift store and prototyping. Okay, so I'd like to take this eventually onto a commercial level. And I know aspects of it are used as such. So in the initial rendition of this, I had figured out a way to install that thing in there, fix it in there, and I used epoxy to hold it in there, right? And then, but you have to access this gear head, okay? So what else is parts of the ice cream? You got the cylinder, right? And so this thing here gets rotated inside a bucket. Right? And this bucket here is full of ice, and you put salt in it. The salt helps transfer, tweaks out the laws of thermodynamics and transfers in, especially when you have the touching of the metal, right? And through conduction, and the transfers that cold into there. So there's two parts of the ice cream tech to get this higher quality, clean, simple, low work input at a cheap cost, instead of having to buy $1,000, $20,000 machine to process. You're utilizing the insulated jacket with salt if necessary in warmer environments. That's a huge energy saving environmental factor right there. Okay, you can create a double jacketed vessel just like that. You can do it in a 32 gallon, 50 gallon, 15 gallon. You can stack these drums up however you would like. Okay, and for $15 at Walmart or Home Depot, you can get these little plastic drums and stack them. You can stack them full of ice and salt, or you can actually create a slurry of alcohol and or glycol and dry ice even. Okay, and then you put another insulation layer on the outside of that. You do not need a cold room to operate this in. And you're not going to do. You can work in 100-degree temperatures, and you're going to have. It's going to stay fucking cold. Okay. Over here on this guy, where'd the box go? You need to figure out. Here's the lid. So my first rendition was I fixed the arm in there, but in order to do that, you take the lid first and put it. Okay. And so I attached the lid into the gear, right? You've got this. And the way it's supposed to go is it sits in the bucket. It all holds by gravity and pressure and whatnot. So, but it doesn't necessarily want to hold in there again. So I originally, that was epoxied in there. And then the head would rotate around it, right? And rotates around. This stands still. And I drilled holes in this, and it came out to, it's full of water. I don't know if I can even lift it up. Initially, I started with 10-gallon stainless steel. All right. And that was sitting inside the 32 gallons. And I used bungee cords to attach the head to the stainless steel handles, and it would rotate that entire inside. And that was super inefficient. It would tilt, it would get off whack and stuff like that. And so the eventual evolution of it, and this is the original prototype where it's at as I built it out. I took that drum and I attached it fixed to the head. I ended up cutting out most of the internal structure of the paddle. Okay, and this is aluminum, and so gently you cut out different flanges on it. Okay, and so that thing spins, and that will fit inside a 5-gallon bucket, a 10-gallon bucket, or the 32-gallon. Super simple rack to hold it on top. Okay, and that thing just rotates inside there, and you can just let it go nice and slow. And depending on a couple of different things, you might end up using a little more, on a secondary or tertiary, when things to soften up a little bit. You can augment with hand stirring and stuff, but in the 10-gallon pail, that it does a nice like 4 ounces, no problem, without even worrying about it. I put as much as 2 pounds of shake into the 32-gallon and left it go for a couple hours and come back, and it's, as long as you rinse with a pressure washer afterwards, it cleans out pretty good. So, I one of the next steps is connecting that power head to a full 5-gallon bucket lid, and or bucket and checking out how well that stirs. The volume, you don't quite get the full volume of the 32 the way the thing's set up as it is. But I think if I put the 5-gallon bucket head in there and you can cut it and you can flange the heads, you can look at like how they make trommels out of them for worms or gold mining and stuff. That is one of the next steps in seeing if I can effectively. So these things are geared super freaking low. They're made to be able to push that head around with that ice cream thickening and freezing and solid, right? And it goes to where it literally binds up and it can't push anymore, and it doesn't freeze up. They're designed to be able to push that torque. Okay, so that's kind of the quick nutshell how we got to Ice Cream Tek through Dr. Oh, and I missed a little point there. The Dr. Dream itself doesn't really, it washes, but it's better to dry sift, right? And there's definitely different genetics that make better wash from dry sift. And real quick, I got 4 minutes left. I want to see if I can't present here. I want to show what this, I've been trying to show. You can see on the side there how clear, that's the stuff I whipped. This is completely freeze thaw in the jar, and I don't know, you have to go, I have to bring that up, but it looks dark because it's thick. But if you can get the section on the side, that was all backwards and upside down here. Yeah, I'm having a hard time showing it. I brought a tool just in case I needed to. So literally just in and out of out. You can see how light it is when you pull it and it fluffs a little. It's literally kind of clear. I just posted on my IG last night some pictures of this jar. Completely solventless. No need for heating up a press. No need for all that extra energy. I fresh frozened it. The next step I'm going to do is actually fresh and not freeze it and throw it right into the washer. But this stuff is literally diamonds recrystallized, completely jar tech. And if I whip it around and thin it out, it goes clear, but it's thick, so it looks dark. But you can see how it's super light when I thin it down there. And anyhow, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to have these super high grades. And again, I was discussing last. I was on Caribou Heart TV. You want to check out that episode? I did a couple hour talk with them, and that's just one form. There's other forms that are super effective for the particular person and their ailments. Okay, and so it's finding out the right thing that fits the right person and the right system and where you're at and making it work. Putting in as little energy as possible to get the greatest returns, right? It's plain old business sense, much less the morality of it. You know what I mean? So I think that kind of brings me down to the end of what all. I had a little fairy came in here and walked away with my water pipe, so I'm not going to hit that up. Let's see. Any questions? I got a feed on. Shout out. We got Loyalty. We got Ryan Blasted Puffin. We got Ponytail Joe, Patio, Penny Pebble Rippers. We got Teva down in South Africa. Tefpa. This is a medicine man friend of mine in South Africa. Old Sans medicine man. Following on the my personal channel here. And he's taught me a whole bunch of real important information, and hopefully I've exchanged a little with him as well. Let's see. Oh, thanks for the compliments. And let's see, who else have we got over here? We've got Great Alaska, Gummo, I'll Be Growing Life, Decoy Beacon. Decoy bacon. You know, chocolate covered bacon is really dangerous stuff. Tequila and bacon are things you just shouldn't bring into the home. Enjoy them when you're out, though. Hawaii Sustainable, Jacob S., Dab PYY, Ken McRae, Squishy Mirror, Kira's Left Red. Shout out to everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. And looks like I'm flat out of time. So we'll see you the next round. Peace out, everybody. Peace out, everyone.